Let me ask you a question. What comes to mind when you hear the term virtual reality? Is it just a gimmick, a dying fad, or maybe you see it as the future of gaming and a unique way to experience art? Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. To me, I always saw VR as the epitome of potential. You can do things in VR that you can't in regular gaming. I mean, you're holding two controllers, and you're fully immersed in your environment. Think of all the possibilities. But something has always kept me from being excited about these possibilities. And that's the fact that they haven't been utilized, have they? A lot of VR games are simply VR takes on pre-existing gameplay formulas. This isn't a bad thing, far from it. I mean, being able to physically pull back the arrow on a bow and shoot rather than pressing a button feels cool and immersive. But there's a reason that most VR games have themselves counterparts on a console or PC. Hell, a lot of them can just flat out be played without a headset. Your options are limited, sure, but not to an unplayable extent. And one game that I think represents this more than anything is Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. This game acted as a soft reboot for the FNAF franchise, being developed by Steelwool Studios, who have gone on to be the developers of the franchise since. Help Wanted was a VR minigame collection of some of the original FNAF games, which of course, were playable without VR. I'm not trying to bash Help Wanted here, far from it. I love this game, it's terrifying. FNAF deserved a VR incarnation, and there's nothing wrong with just making VR versions of pre-existing flat games. However, it's clear that while this game is best experienced in VR, it was designed with the expectation of receiving a flat version, which it of course did, so that anyone could play it. Yet again, this is fine, and does not take away anything from the game's quality in any way. However, I've started to think about the state of VR gaming as of late simply because of one recently released game. That game is Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2. That's right, the sequel to the VR game that's simply a regular game put into VR is one of the only VR games that I consider to not work in any other context other than VR. Try saying that one 5 times fast. FNAF Help Wanted 2 is an outstanding FNAF game, but also an amazing game in its own right, which is something I can't say about some of the other FNAF games, so we're winning with this one, I guess. When I say that Help Wanted 2 couldn't work outside of VR, I'm talking generally. However, those who have played the game know that there's a specific scene in the game that emphasizes this idea more than anything else. But we'll get there when we get there. For now... Okay, so Five Nights at Freddy's is very well known for having an extremely easy-to-follow story. Before I can hop into the game, I want to talk about what I think is most important to bring up to everyone, to bring everyone here up to speed on the pieces of lore we need to know going into this game, since I'm sure that a lot of people watching this video aren't FNAF fans. For those of you who are, please bear with me, I love FNAF, but with how ever-changing the lore is, I'm bound to get some details wrong. Just remember, this isn't a theory video. I'm trying to set up basic information here. Welcome to the FNAF lore lecture. Okay, so in FNAF 4, at the end of Night 5, we get this scene where a bunch of bullies take a kid and shove him into the mouth of this yellow bear animatronic. The kid in the Foxy mask is the crying kid's brother, Michael. The bear is named Fredbear, and the crying kid has been dubbed by the fanbase as the Crying Child, since we haven't gotten an official name. It might be Evan, based on some loose evidence from one of the books, and it might be Cassidy, but that also might be a different character's name. It's incredibly unclear, but all you need to know is the kid fucking dies. So there's this stuff in these robots called spring locks, which can be wound up with a hand crank to push the robot bodies away so that a human can fit inside and walk around in the character mascot suit, right? Kind of like at Disney World. And then the spring locks can be set back in place so it can just be a robot on stage when no one is inside the suit. The problem is, the spring locks are sensitive as shit, and something as simple as spilling water can set them off, and if someone is still inside when they get set off, well, you know, they sort of get crushed by all the robot stuff. So when this kid gets put in the mouth, the spring locks go wacky and the mouth clamps down. Kids go too far, little guy dies at the bite of 83. Not 87, even the Markiplier thought it was. It's the bite of 83. I know it's confusing. Anyways, remember this kid in the Bonnie mask. FNAF Help Wanted was about the main killer from the previous games being reincarnated as a digital entity, or it might just be an AI mimicking him. It's yet again very unclear, but whatever it is, it possesses this girl named Vanessa. She becomes Vanny, then security breach happens. Glitchfest galore, Funny Freddy says the funny line.
You're supposed to be on lockdown.
Vanessa, I'm a material girl.
On to Ruin. So Security Breach got a free DLC expansion which follows this girl named Cassie going to the mall after it's been destroyed to find Gregory, who was the guy we played as in the main game. She finds this mask that Vanny uses, which turns the world around her into something completely different. Making things disappear, making other things appear, making environments drastically different, you know, all that stuff. We learned that these masks were given to employees to help see stuff around the mall. We also learned that Cassie's dad was an employee here. Remember this. Okay, did all of that make sense? Because that's about what you need to know? God, why did I decide to make a video on a FNAF game? With that out of the way, let's talk about the game. It opens on a pretty basic concept. POV, you're an employee. Find a job and make some money. With security breach being set in a mall, Help Wanted 2 is about an employee seeking work there as they try to find the right position to fill. Of course, this isn't the whole truth because certain levels take place in locations that are nowhere near the Mega Pizzaplex location, timeline, or location-wise, but hey, it's a horror minigame collection, what are you gonna do? Our jobs consist of fun activities such as repairing Frederick, committing assault, making soda, and of course, the one that made every furry in the world buy this game. You people need help. Now, all of this is rather, gosh, how do I put this without sounding rude? Oh gee willikers, I'm not so sure. Well, I guess I could call it not fucking scary. At all. I mean, sure, all these minigames are fun and all, but they aren't making me jump out of my seat, piss my pants, and hide under the covers like the first Help Wanted did. The world just seems too happy. Like, something here isn't right, but I can't tell what. I guess the sister location minigames are pretty scary. Breaker Room is quite easy, all things considered, but still evokes that same fear of what's lurking in the dark, and the Entered minigame is great as per usual. Carousel isn't super spooky per se, but it gets really stressful as it goes along. Arts and Crafts looks like a Cocomelon AI content farm from hell, so I'm definitely shitting my pants. But nothing here is all that terrifying on the level that something like Night Terrors in the original Help Wanted was. Regardless, I want to emphasize the way these games were adapted into VR. Breaker Room is from the original sister location game, yeah, but it has been retooled to utilize both hands you have access to in VR. You use the megaphone to defend yourself from Funtime Freddy, of course, but not all tasks you need to do require only one hand. For most, you can just push a lever with one hand and defend yourself with the other, but to complete the minigame, you have to put down the megaphone and focus solely on your task sometimes, leaving you defenseless right up until the last moment. Phaser Blast has you utilize multiple different types of projectiles commonly found in carnival games. Darts, balls, lasers, you know, the regular stuff. The Salon minigame makes you focus on Roxy, utilizing headset position to make sure you don't take your eyes off of her. Not that this fanbase would ever think about doing that, you sick fuck. But none of these are, well, you know, groundbreaking or medium defining like I was suggesting before. That is, until we find this Phaz Wrench. Quick recap. This is a tool employees would use to repair stuff within the mall. It was introduced in Ruin and is the main tool we utilize to solve puzzles. One of these puzzles has been in the corner of this room during the entirety of Help Wanted 2. Of course, now we have the tool we need to solve it. So, we do, which opens a door in the main hub. When we step inside, we see a few key things. An arcade cabinet called Princess Quest 4, Princess Quest 1 through 3 were in security breach, by the way. We see a poster that says, "Clocking out, take off your mask." And of course, the only thing we can currently interact with, an inhibitor. So, these things were in Ruin, and would stop the player from taking the mask off once it was on. This one is currently active, meaning we would be unable to take the mask off if we had one on in the first place. Okay, so we deactivate the device, and, what the hell does that do for us again? I mean, sure, by the rules of Ruin, we can assume that we would now be able to take off the mask, but I mean, it's not like we have one on. The poster, the inhibitor, the arcade machine, the Phaz Wrench, hell, even the minigames before this whole moment have been connecting us back to Ruin, and now, more specifically, the Vanny mask. No tutorial pops up here, nothing like press the A button to take the mask off. No, nothing indicates that you even have a mask to take off than the imagery in this room. The poster shows us an image of someone reaching up to their face to take the mask off, imploring us to do the exact same thing. Those few seconds where you piece together exactly what the game is trying to tell you feel more like minutes with how time seems to stop as your eyes widen under the headset and you piece together what this game has even been. When hovering over an object, a little blue highlight appears around the item. This is to indicate that this item is able to be picked up. So if we press the trigger on the controller, we'll pick up the item. Simple as that. So with nothing else to try and everything seeming to point towards it, the player reaches their hand up to their face, still slightly doubting they even have a mask on. I mean, how? We never found one, so if we have one on, we must have had it on since the very start of the game, which would imply... No, that can't be it. But sure enough, a little blue highlight pops up around your face. Something is there, and only now can you grab it. There's nothing else it could be. So you pull the mask off and see the world for what it really is. This was never some random pizzeria hub world. The mall was never in working position. No, this whole time, nothing you've seen has been real. You can't trust a single thing you've seen or done. The hub world is revealed to be the location from FNAF 6, which, as we know, now lies under the Mega Pizzaplex. That's where we are, under the mall. Suddenly, a lot more of the game starts to make sense. Why are the sister location animatronics here? Well, this is the location from FNAF 6. This is the place that those souls were put to rest. Why are we exploring the mall when it's supposed to be in ruins? Well, that's because it is. But why does the imagery in this game not match up with that? Because nothing we've seen has been real. And now, we can finally see the reality of our situation. The rest of the game essentially puts us back in the places we've already seen in a hard mode, much like the first game. But what's really interesting is how the environments change for a lot of them. It's nothing super crazy, but it's noticeable. What's most interesting here is how now we can collect these memory plushies. Technically, some of them were available before taking off the mask, but most of them aren't until you get these new levels. Sometimes, when you complete a level, in the hub, a little hint will be painted on the wall showing you a different approach to the game, and if you do that, it'll reward you with one of these plushies. My favorite being the secret keypad and the sister location levels, which you can type 1983 into to get the puppet plushie, not only being a reference to FNAF 4 and the Bite of 83, but also to what may be the time in which Charlie dies, although that's just speculation. After beating every minigame and collecting all these weird-looking action figures, the game ends, revealing that we accidentally revived a glitch trap and he has now moved on to taking control of us, showing us haunting the robot which handed the mask to Cassie in Ruin, implying that this game took place right before Ruin and that we are playing as Cassie's dad. Okay, so let me explain. So Cassie explains that Bonnie is her dad's favorite character, and there's a lot of Bonnie imagery in the minigames in this game. Cassie immediately connects the Faz wrench to her dad, and what's the tool we use to unlock the back room and, by proxy, the whole rest of the game? A Faz wrench. There's a lot more to this theory, so if you're interested, go watch people break it down. But my point here is that it's heavily implied that we are playing as her dad and giving the mask to her to continue the cycle of torment we just experienced. If you collect all the memory plushies, you have access to the Princess Quest 4 minigame, which is really cool, but what I really want to talk about here is the fact that we find a Bonnie mask here, further proving that we're Cassie's dad with the Bonnie imagery, and also implying that he's the kid in the Bonnie mask from FNAF 4, what with the achievement you get for doing this being called a lost luggage, saying that this mask seems familiar. I promise there's more evidence for this, but yet again, this isn't a theory video, so, I don't want to go too deep into this stuff. At the end of the arcade game, we see a little scene where Vanny kills Glitch Trap, purging his control over her. What's cool about these endings is that they're both the true ending. Vanny is no longer under the control of Glitch Trap, and our player character now is. That's the end of the game. So why do I give a shit again? Help Wanted 2 is great, but more specifically, the way it utilizes VR is honestly one of the greatest ways I've seen it utilized. Honestly, this is the first time in a long time that a game has made me genuinely excited for the future of gaming as a medium. Cool moments like taking off the mask couldn't be accomplished in a regular game. Plus, the game adapts other FNAF minigames from the series into great VR experiences that yet again couldn't be done anywhere else. When a new FNAF game releases, I constantly see people talking about what it could mean for the lore or what each little tiny detail could mean, but I never see them talked about as games. Granted, this is mostly for good reason, as a lot of them aren't too special, especially the early ones. However, I think the lack of care for what this game does in the department of, being a video game is a criminal disservice to it. Help Wanted 2 has reignited my faith in virtual reality, and has made me genuinely excited to see what people come up with next for developing VR games, all because of some goofy-looking mask. Honestly, I'd go as far as to say that this is the first time in a long time that the future of video games has seemed so exciting. Like, anything can happen. Like, how when you're a kid and it seems like there's no limitations and games are just these magical things. And I feel like some of the interesting ways VR technology is being utilized in the industry is making that childhood fantasy come closer and closer to a genuine reality. This game, and specifically that one moment of taking off the mask, exemplify the best way to utilize visual storytelling and environmental persuasion to make the player figure out what's going on without being told a single explicit detail. That's always been FNAF's thing from a storytelling perspective, but seeing that same strategy applied to gameplay is honestly one of the most immersive experiences I've ever had in a video game. You're not told what button to press to take off your mask, you just do it. You physically grab it, and you physically put it down. That level of immersion is what makes me so excited. And it's what future VR games should aspire to be.